Welcome back to the Wartime Military Podcast. We open on August 4th, 1943, in Bovington Camp, England, where the morning fog clung to 11 tanks idling on the parade ground. This was the start of Exercise Dracula, a secret 2,000-mile trial pitting Britain's new Cromwell tanks against the American M4 Sherman. For the British crews, this wasn't just a test, it was a desperate matter of national pride, a chance to finally erase the humiliating string of mechanical failures that had plagued them in North Africa. They looked at their new tanks, powered by the legendary Rolls-Royce Meteor engine, believing this machine would finally prove British superiority. But this grueling exercise would reveal a devastating truth. Not about speed or firepower, but about the very philosophy of how to build a machine that wins a war. Next, we will delve deeper into this story.
If you're fascinated by World War II history, you know the iconic names. Spitfire, Hurricane, Radar. Britain seemed like the absolute king of ingenious military tech, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They had this incredible reputation for engineering brilliance.
Yet, here's the paradox, and it's a big one. Why did Britain, the nation that gave us Rolls-Royce engines, end up relying so heavily, almost entirely, on American-built Sherman tanks to win the ground war in Europe?
It really is counterintuitive. And look, it wasn't about a lack of bravery from the soldiers, not at all. It wasn't even really a failure of trying to build good tanks. It was something deeper, a failure of industrial philosophy, you could say, design priorities.
Okay, so where does the British effort come in? They must have had their own contender.
Oh, they did. Britain poured his hopes into the Cromwell tank. That's the A27M designation. It was meant to be their homegrown success story.
The Cromwell, named after Oliver Cromwell, right? Quite a statement. And this tank was all about speed, wasn't that the idea?
That was exactly the doctrine. The Cromwell was the peak of the British cruiser tank concept. These were tanks built for fast, mobile warfare. Speed, maneuverability, that was the focus.
And the engine powering it?
That was the heart of it. The Rolls-Royce Meteor engine. It was basically a detuned version of the Merlin engine, the legendary engine from the Spitfire. So the design was really pushing the technical specs.
And those specs sound amazing on paper. What kind of speed are we talking?
We're talking a theoretical top speed of, well, up to 40 miles per hour on a decent road. That's about 64 kilometers per hour.
40 miles per hour. You compare that to the American Sherman. What was that, about 25 mile per hour?
Roughly, yeah. Maybe a bit more depending on the model, but generally around that 25 mile per hour mark.
So that's not just a bit faster. That's a whole different concept of tank warfare, at least theoretically.
It is. The British were aiming for that technical edge, that speed advantage, boasting 600 horsepower. But, as we often see, what looks good on the drawing board doesn't always survive contact with reality. And the big showdown, the moment where theory met harsh reality, came in the summer of 1943. It was this grueling, frankly unglamorous 2,000-mile endurance test across Britain. It was called Exercise Dracula.
Exercise Dracula. Okay, so that's what we're diving into, the data from this exercise. Because the core problem wasn't speed, it wasn't even armor thickness.
No, it boiled down to something far less exciting, but absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Reliability. Just, could the tanks keep running?
And this test, Dracula, it was so revealing, so damaging, really, that it basically forced the British military to rethink everything.
It shattered their confidence in their own designs. It forced this, well, almost humiliating pivot towards the American approach, which was all about simplicity and mass production. But before we get to Dracula itself, you need to understand the context, the string of failures that led up to the Cromwell being Britain's sort of last best hope.
Yeah, lay that groundwork for us. What came before?
Well, if you look at the British cruiser tanks just before this, it's kind of a sad story. The Crusader tank, famous from North Africa early on, was already becoming obsolete by 42, 43.
And then there was the Covenanter. Right. That one has a particularly bad reputation among tank buffs.
Oh, absolutely, the Covenanter. It was supposed to be the next generation, but it was just riddled with problems. So unreliable. Despite building over 1,700 of them, it never actually saw combat.
Never. Why not?
The main killer was the cooling system.
Yeah.
It was completely inadequate. I mean, if your engine overheats constantly during testing in Britain, you're certainly not going to send it to the desert.
Wow. That must have caused huge issues back home, politically and for morale. Was there intense pressure to finally deliver a working tank?
Immense pressure. British leadership felt, well, deeply embarrassed. There's this quote from Alec Richardson, who was with the British tank mission. He said their tanks had made them a laughingstock.
A laughing stock. Ouch.
Yeah, and the explicit goal became creating a first-class cruiser tank, specifically to, quote, regain our prestige. The Cromwell was absolutely that prestige project.
So they weren't just designing for battlefield effectiveness, but also to restore national pride.
That's a really good way of putting it. Pride was definitely a factor. The Cromwell looked good on paper. Decent armor for a cruiser, and of course that powerful Meteor engine.
But did it deliver on firepower?
Well, there was another compromise. Even with all that effort, they couldn't actually fit the high-velocity gun they really wanted into the turret. The turret ring was just too small.
So what did they end up with?
They had to settle for a medium-velocity 75mm gun, a dual-purpose gun, which, ironically, used the same type of ammunition as the American Sherman 75mm.
So they built this complex, high-speed machine, but without the decisive firepower advantage they originally hoped for.
Exactly. All the complexity was still there, but the big punch wasn't, which, sets the stage perfectly for Exercise Dracula, August-September 1943, a showdown across Britain.
Right, a mechanical trial by fire, or rather, trial by mileage. Who were the contenders?
It was a direct comparison. The objective was this punishing 2,000-mile trek, road and cross-country, pitting their homegrown hopefuls, the new Cromwell and the slightly older Centaur, which used the less reliable Liberty engine against the tanks they were getting from America. Specifically, the diesel M4A2 Sherman and the petrol M4A4 Sherman.
Just to see which ones could actually last the distance?
Pretty much. Who could stand up to simulated operational use?
Now, you mentioned simulated operational use. What were the actual conditions like? Because that seems really important.
It is crucial. And here's the kicker. The conditions were actually, well, quite favorable compared to real combat.
How so?
The crews had things like concrete standings to work on. They could usually do major maintenance during daylight hours. Sometimes they even had proper blacked-out workshops available. This wasn't maintenance under shell fire or in the mud.
So it was tough, but not combat tough.
Exactly. And even under these, let's call them optimistic conditions, the general overseeing the exercise made a telling note. He said the British machines were only kept running by dint of much hard work.
Even in relatively good conditions, it was a struggle. What were the specific problems popping up immediately with the Cromwell, their main hope?
Well, frustratingly for the engineers watching, they were, and I quote, old troubles experienced before. Things they thought should have been fixed. First off, constant oil leaks. Engine seals were just not up to scratch.
Which is more than just messy, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a massive fire hazard. Plus, it literally leaves a trail for the enemy to spot. Then, there were persistent brake failures.
Brake failures. On a tank designed to go 40 miles per hour. That sounds dangerous.
Extremely. The brakes were simply not powerful enough for a 27-ton vehicle hitting those speeds. You get dangerous brake fade, especially going downhill. Add to that recurring clutch problems and steering reliability issues. That focus on speed created a whole cascade of other problems.
Okay, so the star pupil, the Cromwell, was already having serious issues. What about the Centaur, the older model in the test?
The Centaur was, well, it was almost a total disaster. Just constant breakdowns. The older Liberty engine had terrible heat issues. The clutch slipped constantly. The crews were just run ragged.
Run ragged how?
We have reports, like from one observer, Captain Priestley, mentioning a Centaur crew having to spend 8 hours on maintenance in a single evening just to be ready for the next day's driving.
8 hours of maintenance for one day's driving? That's unsustainable.
Completely. Okay, so let's get to the hard numbers, because this is where the American design philosophy just crushes it. How did the total distances and the number of breakdowns compare?
Yeah, give us the raw data.
Right. So the American Shermans combined, they drove 13,986 miles during the exercise. They recorded 199 defects requiring fitter attention.
Okay, nearly 14,000 miles, under 200 defects. And the British tanks?
The Cromwells drove less distance, 11,582 miles combined. But they suffered 367 defects, nearly double the number of problems over less mileage.
Wow. Double the defects. And the Centaur.
The Centaur was even worse. Significantly more defects per mile, though the records are a bit less complete because they broke down so often.
But it's not just how often they broke down, is it? It's the time and effort needed to fix them. That's the real killer in wartime. Tell us about the maintenance time per mile.
This is the metric that tells the whole story. For the Shermans, the total specialist fitter time needed was 420 hours across that entire distance.
Okay.
Which works out to just 0.03 hours per mile.
0 .03 hours. What's that in minutes?
It's about 2 minutes. Think about that. On average, 2 minutes of skilled maintenance for every single mile driven.
2 minutes per mile. That's astonishingly low. That must have given the crews immense confidence. What about the Cromwell?
The Cromwell required 814 total hours of maintenance. That comes out to .07 hours per mile.
0.07. So more than double the Sherman's maintenance time.
More than double, yes. And the Centaur.
Mm.
It was the worst performer, clocking in at .087 hours per mile, nearly triple the time the Shermans needed.
That difference is stark. It translates directly into battlefield reality, doesn't it? The Sherman crew fixes a minor issue, gets some sleep, they're ready to go.
Exactly. While the Cromwell crew, as Captain Priestley observed, they're working all night on them, meaning they were going into battle tired with less sleep to look forward to.
Which highlights that fundamental clash in design philosophy.
Absolutely. The American approach was deeply pragmatic. It prioritized simplicity, reliability, ease of maintenance, and mass production. They wanted a tank that, as one report put it, would always start in the morning.
And that built confidence.
Immense confidence. Commanders felt they could rely on taking, quote, 99% of his vehicles into battle.
Whereas the British focus on maximizing speed and technical complexity led to tanks needing constant attention. Poor design and erection, as one report put it.
Yes, the complexity just exhausted the crews. It made the tank itself a burden before it even met the enemy.
So the conclusion from Dracula was unavoidable.
Utterly. A senior British observer wrote that the chief lesson of Dracula was the stark contrast between the simplicity and reliability of the American machines and the British ones. That unreliability wasn't just inconvenient. It created logistical nightmares and crew fatigue that the military knew would be disastrous during a major invasion like D-Day.
So facing that reality, what did they do immediately? You can't just scrap everything overnight.
No, but the changes were swift and decisive. The Centaur was immediately pulled from any consideration for frontline combat roles. It was shifted to training or specialized conversions only.
And the Cromwell. The one with the good engine, at least.
The Cromwell was salvaged, but it needed major work urgently. They had to completely redesign the brakes and clutches. Critically, they focused on improving the engine seals to stop those oil leaks. They basically had to re-engineer its reliability.
Did those fixes work eventually?
They did improve things. A follow-up test in November showed the Cromwell was better, but the sheer dependability of the Sherman had already cemented its place.
So what did this mean strategically heading into 1944 and the invasion of Europe?
The biggest consequence was a massive, unavoidable increase in reliance on American tanks. The British War Office might have wanted self-sufficiency, but the reality was they needed Shermans, lots of them.
Did they cut back their own production?
Yes. British tank production, especially of the Centaur, was significantly reduced. Manpower and resources got shifted to things they were building reliably, like aircraft and naval vessels. It was a pragmatic, if perhaps slightly humbling, decision.
But surely the lessons learned from Dracula weren't just thrown away. Did they influence future British tank designs?
Oh, absolutely. Those harsh lessons were fundamental to the next generation tank, the Comet, the A-34. The designers explicitly focused on incorporating simplicity and reliability features learned from Dracula.
And importantly,
They finally gave it a larger turret ring, big enough to mount a truly powerful gun, the high-velocity 77mm. The Comet really started to deliver on that original cruiser tank promise, but with reliability built in.
And we should give the Cromwell some credit in the end. Once it was modified, it did find its role, didn't it?
It certainly did. Ironically, its speed, the thing that caused so many initial headaches, became its greatest strength after the reliability issues were addressed.
How so?
Its speed, combined with a relatively low profile and good agility, made the improved Cromwell an excellent armored reconnaissance vehicle. It really shone during the rapid breakout phase after the Normandy landings.
So even Montgomery gave it some praise later.
Yes, Montgomery later commended the British cruiser tanks, which by then included the modified Cromwells and the new Comets and Challengers, for making that fast advance across France possible. The speed finally became useful once the tank could actually sustain it.
So the tank that was a reliability nightmare in 43 became a useful asset in 44, but only after learning that hard lesson about dependability.
That's really the core takeaway for you listening. This race for tank superiority wasn't ultimately won by the fastest theoretical design or the most complex machine. It was won by the tank that could just keep going day after day, mile after mile, and actually arrive at the battle ready to fight. Reliability itself became a weapon.
And if you think about that lesson today, looking at complex systems in our own lives, it really makes you pause. Remember that quote, the British tanks were only kept running through much hard work, even in those good conditions.
Right. Think about that implication.
Yeah.
Constant, exhausting effort just to prop up a flawed design. So when you're looking at something complex, maybe a new system at work, a new technology, even just a complicated argument someone's making, are you getting swayed by the impressive headline features, the 40-mile-per-hour top speed equivalent?
Or are you asking the harder, maybe less glamorous questions?
Exactly.
Yes.
Are you demanding evidence of actual day-to-day sustained reliability? Sometimes, the system that seems less flashy but just works consistently without needing constant heroic effort to keep it going, that's the truly superior choice. We often mistake complexity for capability, don't we?